August 14th, 2005. The skies over Athens, the capital of Greece, were haunted by a strange and terrifying guest. About 10,000 meters above the ground, a passenger plane was circling in complete silence, without any communication. The frightening part was that, for the past 2 hours, this plane had not responded to any messages from air traffic control. Fear had spread through the air in Athens. Was this preparation for a terrorist attack or a hijacking event? Fearing this, the Greek Air Force immediately scrambled its fighter jets to intercept it. When the fighter jets approached the plane, they saw a shocking scene inside. It was discovered that there was complete silence inside the plane. No movement, no commotion. All the passengers were sitting lifelessly in their seats, and there was no one in the cockpit either. During this time, the F-16 pilot saw a person in the cockpit who clearly did not look like a pilot. He was moving around in the cockpit as if searching for something or trying to understand something. The next moment, the plane suddenly tilted to one side and began descending rapidly towards the ground. Within minutes, it crashed into the mountains north of Athens. In this accident, all 121 passengers and crew members perished. But what was this whole affair about? Why was there no movement inside the plane? Why weren't the pilots and crew members responding to any calls? And what happened inside after takeoff that later became the cause of a horrifying accident? This is the story of Helios Flight 522, also remembered as the ghost plane. Hello and welcome, everyone. Once again, welcome to my channel. On the morning of August 14th, 2005, at Larnaca Airport in Cyprus, 115 passengers and 6 crew members boarded Helios Flight 522. Their destination was Prague in the Czech Republic, but they had a stopover in Athens on the way. It was summer, and most people were vacationers from Cyprus who were to disembark in Athens. The captain of this flight was a highly experienced person. At 59 years of age, he had over 17,000 hours of flying experience. The first officer was also 51 years old and had logged 7,500 hours in the air. Usually in such accidents, the expertise of the crew is emphasized, but in this case, the story was different. These two pilots had flown together on many flights before, and the first officer had often complained to his friends and family about the captain's pressure and strict attitude. The airline was also aware of this issue. Not only that, but the first officer's training records also revealed that he had difficulty with checklist procedures. This was something that would later prove to be most crucial. The plane was a 7-year-old Boeing 737-300. In the cool morning air, the aircraft took off from Larnaca Airport without any issues. As soon as the plane climbed above 10,000 feet, the crew contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control, and the captain requested permission to cruise at 34,000 feet, which he received. However, as the aircraft reached an altitude of 12,000 feet, suddenly an alarm started sounding in the cockpit. This was the same alarm that often sounded on the ground before takeoff when there was an issue with the aircraft's takeoff configuration. This is why both pilots were surprised to hear it in the air. After 90 seconds, the captain contacted his airline's operations center and informed them about the takeoff configuration warning. He also said that the ventilation cooling fan lights were off and asked where the circuit breakers for it were located. The engineer on the ground replied that those lights should actually be off anyway, and that the circuit breaker was located behind the captain's seat. When the engineer asked the captain to confirm the problem, the captain said, "They are not off." The pilot's response completely baffled the engineer. Meanwhile, the engineer remembered something. Before the flight, this same engineer had checked the aircraft's pressurization system. Because the controls for this system were located near the controls the captain was giving confusing answers about. For this reason, the engineer asked the captain whether the pressurization mode was on auto or manual. But instead of answering, the captain repeated the same question. "Where are the circuit breakers?" During this conversation, the passenger's oxygen mask had already dropped inside the plane. Shortly after this, Helios ground operations lost contact with the plane. In no time, the aircraft reached 34,000 feet, and now all attempts to contact it seemed to be failing. Now, Helios operations contacted Nicosia Air Traffic Control and asked them to try to contact Flight 522. For the next 5 minutes, the controller tried to contact the aircraft, but there was no response. Then the controller contacted another aircraft near Flight 522 and asked them to try to contact it. But this method also failed. By this time, Flight 522 had now entered Greek airspace without permission and was continuing its flight plan. Nicosia Air Traffic Control Tower also tried to contact Flight 522 on the emergency frequency, but no response came from there either. Then they contacted Athens ATC in Greece and asked if they had made contact with Flight 522 or not. Unfortunately, there was no response from the aircraft to their radio calls either. Now there were two possibilities. Either Flight 522 had some radio transmission issue, due to which they could hear the calls, but their responses were not being transmitted, or both pilots had been taken hostage. Considering the first possibility, the Athens control tower gave the aircraft permission to descend, but no indication of descent came from Flight 522. After more than 20 attempts to contact them, when there was no response, Athens ATC was forced to contact the Greek Air Force and inform them that Flight 522 had entered the airspace without permission and was not responding to messages. The Greek Air Force immediately sent two F-16 jets to intercept. By this time, Flight 522 was perfectly following its flight path on autopilot. The point where it was supposed to descend had already been missed twice, but the aircraft was still flying at 34,000 feet. At 7:37 a.m., Flight 522 entered a holding pattern over Athens Airport. A holding pattern is when an aircraft circles over the airport and makes a landing approach once permission is received. When they were on the sixth round of the holding pattern, the two F-16 interceptors intercepted them. It was exactly 8:30 in the morning. One of the two F-16 pilots gave a very surprising report. He said that the captain's seat in Flight 522's cockpit was empty. He also looked inside the passenger cabin. In the light from the windows on the other side, he could see the cabin clearly. The passengers were sitting completely motionless in their seats. However, they had oxygen masks on their faces. When the aircraft was on the 10th round of the holding pattern, one of the F-16 pilots saw a strange sight. A person wearing a light blue shirt and a black vest entered the cockpit and sat in the captain's seat. He put on the headphones and placed his hands on the panel in front of him. The pilots gestured to the person in the cockpit, to which he responded by waving his hand. But just moments later, the aircraft's left engine shut down, after which the plane tilted sharply to the left and began descending toward the ground. Just before 9 a.m., the aircraft turned further left, and then its right engine also shut down. Approximately 4 minutes later, it crashed into the hills northwest of Athens and was destroyed. Immediately after the accident, investigators got to work. They examined the wreckage and also questioned the engineer who had performed maintenance on the plane before the accident. The night before the accident, that same engineer had conducted a pressurization leak test on the aircraft. During this test, he had moved the pressurization mode switch on the overhead panel from auto to the manual position. But after finishing the work, he forgot to return the switch to auto. The aircraft was flying at 34,000 feet, and due to the manual position, the air pressure inside began to drop. At low pressure, the human brain can only function for about 10 minutes, a condition called hypoxia, meaning oxygen deficiency. Its first effect is on the brain, causing confusion, reduced thinking ability, and ultimately unconsciousness or even death. Both pilots were supposed to check this switch during their pre-flight duties, but they didn't notice because normally that switch is in the auto position. They had two more opportunities to identify the problem, before taxiing and after takeoff, but they missed every chance. When the aircraft climbed above 12,000 feet, the cabin altitude warning alarm began to sound. But the pilot's attention was drawn to the takeoff configuration warning instead of the pressurization system. In this misunderstanding, they started the procedure that is usually done on the runway before takeoff, thus completely overlooking the real problem. Meanwhile, the oxygen mask deployed in the aircraft, and the pass oxygen light came on. But due to the initial effects of hypoxia, they probably didn't pay attention to this either. This was the time when the captain and first officer lost consciousness, and after the 10-minute oxygen supply ran out, the passengers and crew also lost consciousness. Now the question arises, who was that person in the cockpit who arrived there 2 hours after they lost consciousness? The investigation revealed it was the flight attendant, Andreas Prodromou, who held a commercial pilot license but was not qualified to fly a 737. The cockpit voice recorder revealed that Prodromo had tried to make Mayday calls after the engines failed, but he forgot to press the transmit button. The investigation board determined that his flying expertise was not enough to control a Boeing 737, especially when the engines had failed due to fuel exhaustion. And even if he had somehow managed to land the aircraft, it would still have been impossible for the passengers and crew to survive because prolonged hypoxia causes irreversible brain damage. During the investigation, 3 out of 4 portable oxygen cylinders were found in used condition in the aircraft's wreckage. This proved that Prodromo and probably 2 other cabin crew members had used these cylinders, which is why they remained conscious longer than the other passengers and pilots. After the Helios Flight 522 accident, the aviation industry learned a lot, and many new SOPs were created, advising Boeing to enhance pilot training and understand the differences between warnings. After implementing these SOPs, an accident like Helios Flight 522 has not happened again to this day. I hope you all will like and share this video from my channel generously. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next fantastic video.